Hi, my name is Christy Clements. Everyone watches AccessTV.org.
Welcome back to another series of Education One. We have our hot group this morning. The first guy up, he's a mover and shaker of Connecticut. He works for the Connecticut Voices for Children, sits on the Board of Education of Hartford, and his name is Robert Cotto. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Sam, how you doing today?
Not bad. Tell the viewers a little bit who you are, what you do, and a little bit your background of education.
Okay. My name is Robert Cotto Jr., and I sit on the Hartford Board of Ed. I'm one of the elected members. There are 4 out of 9 that are elected. I've been on there for about 3 years at this point. And as of last year, I've been doing some research work with a group called Connecticut Voices for Children.
Okay.
And that's a research and policy organization that really advocates at the state level for children and families and providing better opportunities and making wise choices in the public policy arena.
Let's go a little back a little bit. Give the viewers a little background of the educational, where you came from high school, college, and where you are now.
Okay.
It's important to me because a Latino to another Latino is very important to me.
Okay. All right. Well, obviously my family is from Puerto Rico and Peru, so both of them.
Okay.
My father's side, I would consider Black Puerto Rican or Afro-Caribbean.
Okay.
And then on my mother's side, I would consider her, kind of mixed race, kind of indigenous Peruvian and Puerto Rican as well. So it's kind of like a mixed race family ethnicity that we have going on. We came to Connecticut in the 1950s, so we've been here for quite a long time. I was born in New Haven, and then up until maybe like 5 or 6 years old, I lived in Hartford in the North End on Irving Street.
Okay.
So my grandmother had a house there.
Okay.
And from there, my parents saved up money. We moved out to Manchester. We were probably like the first Puerto Rican family in Manchester out there.
Okay.
And then went to school there, and then we moved, and then we went to Wethersfield. And so pretty much I've lived like back and forth, where my father would live in Hartford and my mother would live like somewhere else out in the suburbs. And from there, I went to high school at Wethersfield High, then I went to Dartmouth College and did my BA there.
All right.
And then I did my master's degree at Harvard University at the Graduate School of Education.
Okay.
So I've had like these pretty tremendous experiences.
So you hung out with the Rockefellers in Dartmouth?
Something like that, yeah, Rockefeller Hall and all that stuff, yep.
Let me give you a little background on myself briefly on this. When you lived on Irving, I lived on Magnolia. I lived in their Homestead Avenue, near 15, so we actually were neighbors, even though we didn't know each other.
Yep.
Let's get to the nitty gritty.
Sure, let's do it.
In Sunday's newspaper, it says learning time is more better. And you have one side says longer school days inspire students. But on the other side of the coin, it says extra class hours won't fix learning gap. And this was in the Hartford Current this past Sunday. Tell me a little bit about exactly what you think the Hartford Current is actually saying.
Okay, well, I think what we're talking about is you have a set amount of time, you have a set amount of dollars, and how to use that time that you have in the best way. And recently there was a grant from, I think, the Ford Foundation that provided a certain number of schools some extra learning time or extended day time. And so the debate is really, does adding more hours to the class day help? Does it help in students' learning? And I think the big answer is, or the simple answer is, it depends on how you use those hours. Okay. If you look at the differences, let's say in standardized test scores, for instance, the differences in the amount of learning time really don't explain the differences in the standardized test scores. And so that's a big fact that we have to really think about, is that oftentimes extra time doesn't mean extra learning.
Right.
Okay. Now there are instances in where you could say that extra time in the classroom or extra time during the summer may be helpful if it's for kind of extra sort of learning opportunities, like going to museums, going to the art museums, going to the science center, those sort of kind of extracurricular. I'm trying to think of the exact word I would say is kind of things that enrich kids' learning.
Right.
But I think if we're talking about extra preparation for the Connecticut Mastery Test or
Right.
CAP test, I'm not so sure that makes a huge difference for kids' learning.
We have a follow-up article on today's newspaper, which is actually in the Hartford Current again. It says making the grade. And I just want to show this to the viewers of the Hartford Current. It says making a grade. It says top performers. And you look at the top schools, we got Weston, which is part of Westport. We have Richfield, which is near New Canaan. And then you have Regional 9, and you got Simsbury, which basically, quote unquote, really actually white areas, predominantly white areas. Then we have coming down, it says significant progress, where we have Thompson, New Milford, Middletown, and Waterbury. New Britain just talks about the elementary school. I have been to New Britain High School several times, and I never witnessed a jail inside of a high school in New Britain High. I don't know if you've been there or not, but they do have a jail inside the school. At MC Square, in the last 10, 12 years, the producer of this program and others and I always looked at the dropout rate in truancy. That's our main goal for the last 12 years. Can you tell me why the dropout rate in truancy is still high after 12 years?
Okay. Well, this is a little bit different from the making the grade, because the making the grade is specifically based on standardized test scores in the state of Connecticut. But kind of moving to, I'm glad that you're talking about graduation rates and kind of like that sort of thing. I don't think there's one particular answer, but I'll give you a bit of background. First of all, the graduation rate in Connecticut, we have one of the highest graduation rates in the entire country. We're probably in the top 5 at something like 80% of students that start out in the 9th grade and then go on to the 12th grade. About 80% of those kids graduate, and that's from the State Department of Education website. So we have a high graduation rate, but there's large disparities, particularly like you were saying, along race lines and ethnic lines and along class lines. Okay? So I think what the big issue is we have to think about is, what are we offering our kids in terms of school? Okay. Over the last 10 years, we had something called the No Child Left Behind, where we looked at standardized test scores, we looked at graduation rates.
Under Bush.
Under President George W. Bush.
Yep.
And President Obama has done some similar things in terms of that. I think the big question is, what are we providing in terms of school? Are we offering a very engaging environment for kids in school? Are we connecting to them through a balanced and relevant curriculum? Okay. Are we providing the resources that they need to learn and to do well and to succeed? And I think that mix of things is what we have to start looking at, because when we simply look at the indicators, meaning the numbers, the graduation rates, or the making the grade, like in the Hartford Current, we sometimes forget that there are tremendous disparities, not just in where these kids come from, but what the schools are offering.
This is a question that it leads into the last question. And this is basically the heart and breath of me, MC Square, myself, and others doing some work in Hartford. And this troubles me, because in Hartford, it has a lot of potential. It can grow faster than any other, since it's the capital. But there's disparity between groups. So if there's the disparity between groups and other nonprofits, it would trickle down to the students or to the parents. And this is something that I know that, I don't know if you have statistics on, but I know last year, the data I got, is still in the high 40s in dropout and truancy. And I know that right now City Hall and the Board of Education is going at it, especially with the superintendent of schools.
Well, I think the thing is in Hartford, the direction that they've decided to take, and I'm putting on kind of my board of head hat, as an individual member.
Right.
But they've tried to offer different alternatives for kids and different types of programs. So we have something like Opportunity High School, which is a very intensive program that kind of provides the
OPP.
OPP, right? It provides the social service model where they check in with kids and they have like a caseworker and that sort of thing. It's a fairly expensive program, kid per kid.
Right.
So there's those models. There's the magnet schools that are basically meant to provide quality integrated education, and there's some good indications that these things are actually very helpful. And then there's the kind of pre-vocational programs like culinary and those sorts of things. And I think the purpose was to give kids these options and to try to hook them in. To a particular thing.
Is it working?
Well, I think that's the big question. I think when we have to ask ourselves, when we say, is it working? We have to look at a variety of indicators. So do we look at test scores? Do we look at the culture and climate in the school? Meaning, like, is there an environment of respect? Is there an environment of engagement? When kids get in there and they feel connected to the people, to the culture of the school, to the academic environment. I think those sort of things we haven't really looked at, and so those are the things that we have to say, well, is it working? Because I think that's what's important. We don't get that from just looking at a single number that rates a school or a standardized test, percent at whatever. We don't really get at that. So I think your question is, does it work? You have to connect that to how do we know if it's working or not?
I'm going to ask you one question before we go to break. And this is something that is personal. I know many of the people have came to you, like myself just recently. What can you do as an individual to sort of fix what's wrong in the Hartford school system? What can you do as yourself? I mean, you're one person out of 9, but what could you do to make it a little bit better within the atmosphere between City Hall and actually the board itself?
Are you asking me in particular, like as an individual, or you're saying advice to the audience?
Right, yeah. Just what could you do?
I think the biggest thing is a couple things. Take an issue, whether it be graduation rates, whether it be choice, or whether it be the curriculum or the culture and climate. Take one issue and run with it.
Okay.
I think that's the big thing, is like take an issue and run with it. And then the other thing I would say is become an expert, become a resource to people. So for example, on the Board of Ed, I know a few things about test scores, indicators, statistics, and those sorts of things, and policy as well. So I've tried to be a resource for my fellow board members and for other people in the community, because there's a lot of people in the community may not understand the statistics that are coming out on our schools, and so I try to interpret for the community and help them out and understand, like, this is what this is saying, and it's not necessarily what what the Board of Ed wants you to know about it, but it's kind of like, this is another way of looking at it.
Because a couple of years ago, I came to a Buckley board meeting, and you fought the ex or the former superintendent on some things, and I thought you was a champion of it because he wanted to pass it through, and you said, no, we have to take a look at this. And it kept on, the conversation kept on going on. He says, well, I disagree. And you kept on disagreeing. And I said, if all the people sit on the board, if you only one disagreeing, then to me, you became like a Joshua or Elijah, because guess what? You know something was wrong, and you want to attack the situation of how this thing was. And that's why I have a tremendous amount of respect for you, because when you look at education system in Hartford, it's done in cliques and groups. And this is one of the downfalls of Hartford, why Hartford cannot go forward. And if we have superintendents come every couple of years, every 2 or 3 years, they're gone. We pay out all this amount of money, they're gone. And I'm hoping that maybe after next year, we can solve this problem and make these kids go forward. We have to pay some bills. We'll be right back, and we'll be at our second half of our show with Dr. Lawrence Deutsch. Thank you. We'll be right back.
Was that okay?
My brother, yeah.
How do you judge a law firm's success? Cases won, money made, or what the firm does in the community? At Dressler Strickland, we know that success is just the beginning. The true measure of success is what you do with it. For 33 years, we've used our success to help our neighbors and our community. 24/7, 11/22. Whenever you need us, we'll be there. Dressler Strickland, building communities one case at a time.
First we read, then Coco Key. What time is it?
Time to read!
It's always time to read. Make Education and Hartford Public Schools declare reading a team sport and award a fun-soaked celebration at Coco Key Water Resort to the school with the most books read. Your achievement level is displayed by Make Education Time to Read wristbands.
Motivate, stimulate, educate.
Make Education makes it fun. Puerto Rico Discovery Month. Did Columbus realize the enormity of his discovery? The art, the history, the literature, the people, the music. Puerto Rico Discovery Month. It's for everyone to enjoy.
Welcome back to the second half of Education 1. We have a gentleman that I love, and he's the toughest person to me in the Hartford City Council. He's a doctor by trade. His name is Dr. Larry Deutsch. Welcome.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Before we go on, tell the audience and the viewers a little bit about who you are, what you are, and why you are the John Wayne of Hartford.
Oh, boy. I like to think of myself in the past and even now as a pediatrician, mostly as a doctor, medical doctor.
Okay.
In fact, I was at a lecture this morning about heart surgery, and in a sense, there's a science, a reason to that, which goes beyond the kind of thinking that sometimes goes on in the City Council and the Board of Education, which a lot of it is emotional and just opinion-driven.
Right.
On the other hand, sometimes you realize that you have to get political when things are not so hot here in the city of Hartford or anywhere in the world. So it means using what you know, your science, whatever abilities you have, and people ask you, well, what should we do about this and that? You have to have a public attitude. So I shifted from pediatrics into public health, which now is more political and more economics. And from that, someone said, well, why don't you run for city council? So that was a trap I fell into, and sure enough, we're trying to make a difference on the city council right now here in our impoverished city of Hartford.
Now, when I first met you, it was some time ago, because you've been on the city council for 4 or 5 years,
Yeah.
a little longer.
Right.
And you and Dr. Painter and a few other people did things, and I love Dr. Painter because he's basically, when you guys came into the city council, and stop me if I'm wrong, because
Yeah.
I want to make sure this is the truth,
Yes,
and this
yes.
program's built on the truth, is that you actually was the forerunner, or actually the big stake guy that says, hey, these are the things we need to do, how we need to do it, and people need 100% credibility and actually transparency to let know what's going on in Hartford.
Right.
And since the time been going on, you've still been fighting the fight. And this is one of the reasons why I love you to death and respect, because you're a no-nonsense person. What I want you to tell the viewers is, where are we going right now with education in Hartford, and from the health standpoint, from obesity?
I see, okay. Maybe, though, if it's okay with you, I'll go back a little bit.
Okay.
Even before becoming a doctor, some of us grew up at a time period when we saw social injustice, and we were not only inside but outside in the streets demonstrating. We would
Okay.
demonstrate for peace, civil rights, against police brutality, and improvement of the education system. So for some people who are old enough, but also young people, they have been activists. And taking it to now in City Council, it's somewhat political, and there's this thing called the Working Families Party, which tries to move things forward and make a difference, not only in an elected body, but outside.
Okay.
So it's an approach that really tries to shake things up, ask good questions, and show people what's what when there's power and money that is up for debate.
Right.
So in terms of, let's say, taking care of helping young people, you can realize in medicine it's not just giving them an annual checkup and giving them a blood test or something. You have to recognize them as persons facing a situation. In education, you can do all the formal schooling you want, but if they don't have jobs, they don't have a place to fit into in their community, then some of it, I wouldn't say goes to waste, but is not channeled in the most productive way. Their skills are not recognized with a good job and forward-looking opportunities. So this is what motivates anyone, whether it be in medicine or education, for looking at the whole context. Go ahead now. You want me to address particulars about teenage women?
What I wanted to do is, at MC Square, let me back up a little bit. And I really don't want to put you on a spot, but in a sense, I have to in a sense, because we're still talking about education and health.
Yes.
We have a thing in Hartford for the last couple of years of obesity, bullying, and actually health of ADH.
Right.
We have a combination of all three different things, but it still comes down to health. And I see that in the newspapers like the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, and I read different people saying kids are diagnosed with ADH and they may not even have ADH. Or it's a quick solution of just give them pills or send them to the doctors.
That's right.
But they could be a little slow of learning, because everyone has a different ability of learning. From your standpoint, and you wear many hats, is the Hartford school system kids, especially in the North End, because I'm big time in the North End.
Yes.
Is there a heavy problem with kids with ADH that
Well,
you know of?
by that you mean, I assume, attention deficit and hyperactivity and
exactly.
things like that.
Yeah.
All of which is a little vague.
Right.
The problem is that you need teachers who understand it. You need classrooms that are not huge, and you need the opportunity for anyone, including a young person, to learn on their own sometimes, as well as sitting in a classroom. People have different styles. Some of us learn better sitting in a library reading a good book, or maybe watching instructional videos. So first thing, when you have a school system that doesn't have a lot of money, or has big classes, or is in an impoverished neighborhood, you can't recognize the individual needs and differences in terms of their learning styles and abilities. It's just like you can't lump people together and expect they'll all just take in the information as if it's on an assembly line. So that's some of the difference. Some of it, of course, has to do with testing and the compassion of their teachers. The whole environment. They can't go home to a very congested environment if they have to take care of a little brother or sister at home. How can they study? Things like that. It's a whole big picture. In terms of otherwise teenagers and their health care, they may not eat well. They may not have the opportunity. They may eat on the fly. This could be true of anyone, but when you live in poverty, let's say, or even in a third world country where there's not a good variety, people tend to get obese. They have other illnesses. Their overall health is just not as good because they don't have the opportunities and the wherewithal, the money in their pocket in order to make the best food choices. And they don't have the supermarkets and stuff where they can get all those things in the North End of Hartford and other places.
Let me just cut you off for a second. Sitting on the city council, is there enough money right now going into the school systems for actually health and food? Is there enough money, or are we short coming up for the fiscal year?
Oh, coming up, we're very short.
Okay.
The question is, coming up, are we short now? You could say you could always use more money, and then other people say, well, it's how you allocate it. Okay, so you go through that and you say, well, a lot of children in Hartford get free breakfast, but if they don't have the opportunity to eat it in the right place, the right time, they may skip it. There are many things besides money. That's what everyone says, and to some extent it's true. On the other hand, we have high expenses in Hartford because many children have special needs. No question. Any big city has that more so than a wealthy suburban town. So I would say no, there's not enough money, and it should come from the state evenly, the way the courts have ruled, rather than being the burden of each city to pay for it from their own taxes on their own poor residents. That's the unfairness of it, is where that money is coming from also.
Is there a fair question to say that we're in 16 and a half or 17 miles how big Hartford is?
Yeah.
Is there too many schools in Hartford?
Well, I don't think you could say there are too many schools. I haven't heard that question asked. Some people say there are too many fire stations too, but basically it's a matter of service to the public. And if you have a school, and some people will say it's underpopulated because of this choice system where people may be running elsewhere, which is another question. This issue of choice, if you have some children advancing in the school they choose, what happens to the ones left behind in the neighborhood?
And that's the question I bring up, Dr. Larry, because the thing is that I see that under the old administration of Eddie Perez, the focus was the South End,
Right.
West End.
Yes.
I see a lot of schools in the last, say, from 2005 to the present, has actually been redesigned under Dr. Abramowski, which he did a horrible job.
Yep.
And one thing about it, when you take arrogance against someone think they're brilliant,
Yes.
and then you have minority kids,
Yep.
Black and Latino kids, and some American Indians, and even some low-income whites,
Right.
and then you shut down some schools. Like Quirk Middle School is still under redesign.
Right.
You have the old Weaver, or the new Weaver, I don't know which way this is going to go. I have no idea. And I see that every time when I see that something is running of a scholarship or something that have high accolades, is Byrne, and it's all these other schools in the South End, or Kennelly School. But Milner School had to go through a metamorphosis
Right.
of Dr. Richardson actually leaving, which I thought he was a nice person, a good guy. Thurman is still there. He's sort of ill, but is named after the first black mayor.
Right.
But you had Jamoki take over the school,
Right.
saying that it's a successful program, which it is. But if you have money coming into the school and you have the best teachers, whatever, it should be great.
Right. You see, the previous speaker, Robert Cotto Jr., just on a previous, mentioned
Right.
disparities in the city.
Right.
So even though in Connecticut you may have an average of 80% graduation, it could be 95% in Simsbury and 60% or less here in Hartford.
Right.
So you can't say the state on average has good education or has high income when it's really two states in many ways, wealthy and poor.
Right.
So we have to emphasize that. In terms of health, you can have all the averages you want, but if some people don't get preventive care, they'll get sick. And it varies according to class, race sometimes. Mostly it's wealth, class, poverty that are the issues in health and education, we say. And some of that has to do with getting work, jobs, and in Hartford we have a lot of work to do, put it that way. Some people are in it for their own gain. I must say some of it's political.
Yep.
When you have a certain superintendent or certain people in city government want to make a good show for themselves, a good name, they pick out the best of the statistics, which don't necessarily indicate the whole range. That those statistics have some good and some bad. You do have some children left behind. That's the sad thing.
It is. I mean,
Yeah.
but when I look at that, when I asked Dr. Abramowski a couple of years ago,
Yep.
it was on close to a graduation. I says, why is the dropout rate still over 50%?
Right.
He said, but the graduation rate is high.
Yeah.
I said, let me ask you a question again.
Yeah.
Why is the dropout rate in truancy still over 50+%?
Right.
And he's looked at me and walked away.
Sure.
So my thing is, if you're going to go ahead and give me an answer like that, it tells me a couple different things. You don't care about me, you don't care about my people or my kids, and you're not part of the system.
Right.
You're just here to earn a buck. Now, the crazy part about it is he leaves the Hartford school system and goes to Wyndham. Now he's in New London. But when you're getting picked up for DWI almost every week, how can you teach a
Well,
child?
here we try not we try not to personalize it. There's
Right.
in my mind, there's a whole category of people who are making their livings off of a system that is becoming fragmented. They're taking their piece,
Right.
getting high salaries,
Right.
with organizations, and sometimes we might as well mention on this show, privatizing schools.
Right.
Some of us think destroys a good public system. Just
Right.
like in health, you privatize so many things. You have someone getting this money here, that money there. They're all
Right.
making good livings, and the people are suffering overall because the public conception, the public benefit is being destroyed by everyone taking their own private piece. And in education, we have to watch out for that. If I had any message to say, we want a good public school system run by the public with input, with parents and teachers participating, not just being told what to do. Same way in public health. We don't want all these insurance companies, don't let me go off, taking their pieces while the people don't get what they should. So in public school, if I didn't just say in terms of health But we want a public approach that looks at everyone's needs but takes a preventive and an overall view, and not just what can they make out of the system, which so many people are unfortunately doing. That's why it's so expensive in the United States. And it's going to be that way in education. It's private interests that are sucking it out of the overall public good.
We have about a minute left. What could you tell the viewers that what Dr. Larry's doing?
I would say to everyone, you might as well get political, because if you want decisions to be made and you think things are not going well, you have to either be in office or be outside on the streets telling the officers what to do. Otherwise, things will continue the same or get worse. And so I would say, if people think you can speak well and think well, make something of it and be a little pushy, I guess I would say.
Right.
People say you've got to keep asking questions, whether in your classroom, in a city council, or out on the street. Ask questions. If you don't get answers you need, you keep asking them, right? I'm
going to have you and Mr. Cotto Jr. come back in 2013, because this is a hot topic. And you know me, I'm not going to let it go.
Well, that's fun. 2013 is only 2-3 weeks away,
right.
So we'll do it again.
Thanks for coming.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thanks for viewing into Education 1 for this week. And before I get off the air, I'd like to show one bit of information. And this was actually 2 weeks ago from the Jimi Hendrix Foundation and from Jimi Hendrix in Seattle. I thank you guys. I love you. I've been with you. I've been with Jimi Hendrix for the last 30 years. I see you next week. We're out of time. Thanks for viewing into Education 1. Have a nice day.